Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video, wherever you are, whatever you may be doing. Thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd Family part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. If you jump on here live here on this Sunday afternoon, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. Down below, make sure to give the video a like, a thumbs up. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so and share the video on all social media platforms. I know that we have some more college football games coming up a little bit later on today and tonight, and I'll talk about them coming up sometime later on in the week. Good afternoon, Kevron. Glad to have you here as always. And on my Friday night video, I talked about the games that were worth talking about from Thursday night and Friday night. So today I want to talk about the games that are worth talking about from yesterday. This opening weekend is hard to keep up because there's 5 days of football, but of course there's never going to be a weekend where every single game on the schedule looks like it's going to be competitive. Some weekends have better games than others, but in every weekend there's always some games that look competitive and some games that don't. Then there's some games that don't look competitive that end up being competitive, and then some games that look competitive that end up not being competitive. But I try to focus on the ones that, at least on paper, look like they're going to be competitive or worth talking about for some reason or another. Like, I'm not going to talk about Florida and Long Island. I know a middle school team that can beat Long Island. That game's not worth talking about. But Ohio State beat Texas by the score of 14-7. I'm sure it was much lower scoring than anybody thought it would be. Now, Julian saying he's not near as good as J.T. Barrett or Cardell Jones or Will Howard or any other Buckeye quarterback they've had the last 15 years. But at the same time, Julian saying doesn't need to be. Ohio State's defense now is top 5 in America. And I warned everybody going into last year that even though they had all that great talent on offense, their defense is going to be what was so good about them. And it looks like it's going to be that way again this year. If Julian Sayin just plays average and doesn't turn the ball over, if the Buckeyes score 21 points a game, they probably won't lose. Their defense is phenomenal. I'm not a big Matt Patricia fan. Never have been. I'm still not. But the talent they have on defense is so good that I don't even think Matt Patricia can mess it up. Hey there, Big Trippy. Glad to have you here. And Arch Manning looked average, like I thought he would. He's overhyped because his last name is Manning, but nothing about him screamed great. He completed less than 60%, which is not that good. I think he had 10 carries, 38 yards, which is not quite 4 yards a carry. And they've now started a new stat, and it could be to help Arch, could be to hurt Arch, but yesterday it hurt, and it said he missed on 37% of his throws. So when they do that, they're telling you there's a difference in incomplete passes, which there is. Is it one that was right on target and the receiver dropped it? Was it one that was right on target, but the receiver fell down? Was it one that, you're trying to avoid a sack and just threw it out of bounds? When it says you missed on 37% of your throws, that means a receiver was open and you just flat out missed them. And that is all on the quarterback. Hey there, Pramod. Glad to have you here on this Sunday afternoon. But I still think Texas is going to be fine. But Arch Manning didn't do anything yesterday that screams Heisman Trophy. And Indiana, I'm going to follow because a lot of people still have them as a possible outside shot to win a playoff spot because most people don't think Michigan's good enough this year. And we know that 4 or 5 teams out of the Big Ten are going to go. And if Indiana can be just halfway as good as last year, they might could get in. And now, of course, they have Mendoza at quarterback, the transfer from California, and he's actually a really good quarterback. And we know their coach is a winner. And then Tennessee beat Syracuse 45-26. I don't think anybody's surprised about Tennessee putting up 45. I think the shock was them giving up 26 on defense because Syracuse lost their quarterback, their running back, all their receivers, and their tight end. And Tennessee was, if they weren't top 10 last year in total defense, they were close. So you would think with Tennessee's defense being so good, supposed to be improved this year, and Syracuse losing every skill guy they had, you would think they wouldn't move the ball. They moved the ball pretty easily. But I think Tennessee got the upper hand in the quarterback trade, so to speak. It wasn't a trade because they didn't bring in a UCLA guy, but they basically let Nico go to UCLA, and then they bring in Joey Aguilar from Appalachian State. And Joey Aguilar, there's nothing about him that's great. He's probably a B in accuracy, a B in arm strength, a B at reading defense, a B athlete. He doesn't stand out in any column, but he's not bad in any column. He's definitely a better overall player than Nico because, Nico had great arm strength, but in everything else, he was below average, whereas Aguilar is just average in every category. But I think Tennessee got the upper hand in letting Nico go. Hey there, Braden. Glad to have you here. And then Mississippi State beat Southern Miss 34-17. I think Mississippi State is awful. So I just kept up with that game because if Mississippi State wins 5 games, it'll be a good season. And then Tulane destroys Northwestern 23-3. Glad to have you back, Braden. And, Tulane's quarterback is now Retzloff, who comes in from BYU. If you haven't heard the story on Retzloff, it was either him leave BYU or be suspended for, I believe, 7 games. So instead of being suspended 7 games for breaking basically their school policy, he decided to go ahead and leave and go to Tulane. And, Tulane was already a really, 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 really good team. But, adding him probably makes them even better. And then Kentucky, just like Mississippi State, Kentucky is awful. I think their over-under is 4.5. I don't see any way Kentucky gets to 5 wins. Now, their quarterback is Calzada, who's been in college since 1950, but I just don't think they're any good. I think this is going to be Mark Stoops last year in Lexington, Kentucky. And then we have Florida State beating Alabama 31-17. Probably a shocker to most people, even though I said on here for a month that I thought Florida State had a chance to hang with them. And I said that Bama's a 9-3 team, maybe. And I've said on here since at least 2023, if not 2022, that Alabama's run's coming to an end. Their glory days are behind them. People don't want to believe it, but it's true. And it was nothing to upset the fan base intentionally. And it was nothing to get anybody riled up intentionally. I just say what I believe. And if you look at Alabama's talent level, it's just not what it was 5 or 6 years ago. It's just not there. And the reason why Nick Saban quit was because Nick Saban realized it wasn't there. And Nick Saban's not going to coach a team that's going to go 8-4. It's not going to happen. And he thought, you know what? Instead of coaching and getting 7 or 8 wins, I'm going to retire. And at his age, nobody questioned it. But look how many years Bobby Bowden coached. Look how long Paterno coached. If you've got a desire to coach, if you're 140 years old, if you're still winning, you're going to keep coaching. So Nick Saban did not retire because he's old. He retired because he realized that their talent level was just not what it was, and it's not. They're still decent, but they're no longer great. They used to have 5-star talent at every position. Now they've got about 2 5-star guys on defense and about 2 5-star guys on offense that are actually legit 5-star guys, not built up as 5-star guys, but really 5-star guys. And the rest of the team's just average. And they can't run the ball. They've become one-dimensional basically overnight. Not literally overnight, but it feels that way because they used to be such a good running team, and now all of a sudden they just can't run the ball. And Roydell Williams, he left Alabama as one of their running backs to go to Florida State, And he, all of a sudden, in one game, looks better at Florida State than he did the last couple of years at Alabama. They just can't run the ball. And we got to follow Liberty because a lot of people think with Liberty's schedule and the talent Liberty has, they could possibly be 12-0 or 11-1 again. So some people had them as a group of 5 playoff spot. Well, now the Army already has a loss and Boise State already has a loss. If Liberty or Memphis or Navy, if one of those 3 teams goes undefeated, they'll get that playoff spot for the group of 5 since Boise's already lost and Army's already lost. Liberty defeats Maine 28-7, and then Memphis defeats UT Chattanooga 45-10. I know Memphis lost their quarterback that they had for 20 years, but they brought in Lewis, who is now with his 3rd team, so he's got plenty of experience, and their offense looked just as good to me, and I think Silverfield is a great coach. And then I had to follow Kansas State and North Dakota because Kansas State was actually still ranked because they were ranked 17th when the season started, and there was no poll after the week 0 games. So Kansas State started this week 0-1, still ranked 17th, but they had to score with about 45 seconds left to beat North Dakota 38-35. So the offense was fine. Defense was optional for the Wildcats last night. And then I followed this game because it was actually close at halftime. I think Texas A&M was up 21-10 at halftime, or maybe I think it was 21-10, but they ended up beating UTSA 42-24. And then got to follow Utah and UCLA because now that Utah no longer has Cam Rising and they brought in Dampier, who I think is a phenomenal quarterback. I think Utah's back to being a top 10 team. They destroy UCLA 43-10. And I think California, just like Mississippi State and just like Kentucky, they're a 4-win team, maybe. Well, last night was one of the games they had to win to try to get to 4 or 5 wins. They pulled it out. They beat the Beavers of Oregon State 34-15. And then Louisiana Tech I followed only because, Louisiana Tech is amazing because, their coach is Sonny Cumbie, who used to be a quarterback for Texas Tech, and then he was an offensive coordinator, and it's amazing that he's now their head coach, and what they struggle with is offense. They played Southeast Louisiana, and at halftime it's Louisiana Tech 3, Southeast Louisiana 0. But Louisiana Tech goes on to win the game 24-0. But this is probably Sonny Cumbie's last year if they don't get to at least 6 wins. And with an offense like that, I don't know if they're going to get to 6 wins. And then I wanted to save the Clemson LSU game for last because I had some thoughts on the game. And in case there's anybody else on here with thoughts on the game, I wanted to get them at the same time. But, back when I did LSU's schedule, I think late May, early June, I had them going 10-2. And I think I said in that video that LSU would beat Clemson, and Clemson's one loss would beat LSU. But then as the offseason progressed, the closer we got to the regular season, the better I felt about Clemson winning because it was at home. It was a season opener. Brian Kelly, for whatever reason, struggles in season openers. And I know every year you really can't pay much attention to what Dabo says because Dabo's always ultra positive. He always has been. Dabo, at least in front of the camera, he never comes out and bashes players. He never does that, never has. So when Dabo's ultra positive, you ignore it because Dabo's always ultra positive. But you had other media members, whether it was, TV, radio, magazine, it didn't matter, that have spent all off season talking about how much better the offense was going to be. And I think with Tom Allen coming on, everybody thought the defense would be better, and the defense was better. If you hold LSU to 17 points, and that's pretty doggone good. I mean, that might have been the fewest amount of points they scored in any game last season. So holding LSU to 17 points is not bad. So the defense was fine. Was there a few chunk plays? Absolutely. That's always going to happen. But compared to what they had last year, it was a whole lot better. But Clemson scored 10. And it's the third straight season that all I've heard about is how much better the offense is going to be, and then get on the field and it's just not there. And you hear a myriad of reasons and a myriad of excuses. Some people try to say that, it's not Garrett Riley's offense. His hands are tied by Dabo being conservative. And unless you're on campus, you don't know whether that's true or not. So you can't say it's true or not because you don't know. It's a possibility. But when Dabo became the head coach, he told the coordinators he was conservative. But then when he hired Chad Morris years ago said, hey, I'll come on board as long as my hands ain't tied. As long as I have full control of the offense, I'll come. And Dabo said, sure, absolutely. So Chad Morris comes, and then, of course, Chad Morris leaves, and they get Tony Elliott and Jeff Scott, and their offense is still fantastic because Dabo lets them call plays. So why would you become unconservative and let Chad Morris and then let Tony and Jeff call plays, and then all of a sudden when Garrett Riley comes, go back to saying, nah, your hands are going to be tied, I'm going to run this offense? That doesn't make sense because allowing the coordinators to call plays led to you being a top 5 offense every year and won you national championships. So why would you then go backwards and stop letting them call plays? But at the same time, Garrett Riley's been so successful everywhere he's been. Why would he come to Clemson all of a sudden now his offense sucks? Nothing about it makes any sense at all. And also, if you're Garrett Riley and you've been so successful everywhere you've been, if your hands are tied and you want to call plays but the coach won't let you, why would you stay? Why wouldn't you leave and go somewhere where you could call plays? But if Garrett Riley is calling plays, why are they so bad? Nothing about the offense right now makes sense. And that's the biggest issue. Because, yeah, the defense looked much better. But if you can't score, you're not beating Georgia Tech. You're not beating Louisville. You're not beating Florida State. You're not beating SMU. You're not beating South Carolina. 10 points is not going to beat anybody with a pulse. I don't care that the defense has improved because it has. You have to score. And you can just about tell at halftime what's going to happen because Garrett Riley's offense is all about flow and all about rhythm. And last night, even though Clemson was ahead at halftime 10-3, through the whole entire half, I thought, they're going to get beat because they didn't score. It's like if they go into halftime and they've got 20 or 21, 24 points, they're fine because they've gotten a rhythm. They know if they need to score, they can. But if it's halftime and Clemson's got 7, 10, 13, you can forget it because they realized, hey, we've played a half and we can't score, we're in trouble. And the only way they're going to win the game is if their defense throws a second half shutout. So you can just about tell at halftime right now what Clemson is going to do. If they don't score in the first half, forget it. If it's halftime and they've had 2 or 3 good scoring drives, they got a pretty good shot. But nothing about it makes any sense right now that you have all this 5-star talent and you can't move the ball. Just like Matt Luke. Matt Luke has been a phenomenal offensive line coach everywhere he's been. And he comes to Clemson, and the offensive line against decent defenses is terrible. You're going to tell me Matt Luke all of a sudden can't coach offensive line anymore? And if it's your starters that are experienced, I don't care if they're experienced. If they suck and the freshmen you got are better, put in the freshmen. Dabo's never had an issue playing freshmen if they're better. So nothing about the offense right now makes any sense at all. And the way Dabo will change coordinators if he thinks they're the issue, just like when he fired Brandon Streeter. Then last year he fired Goodwin because he thought Goodwin was a problem on defense. If he thinks Garrett Riley's a problem, why does he keep bringing him back? So nothing about the offense right now makes any sense at all. They spent all offseason talking about how they finally had good running backs and they're ready to see what Adam Randall can do. And then he goes out there and he gets 5 carries. The run game makes no sense. The passing game makes no sense. Who's calling plays? Nobody knows. None of it makes any sense. Now, it's just one game, so you really can't put too much stock into it because you can still go 11-1 or 10-2 like last year when you lost your first game. And, last night gets forgotten. But you got to make some serious changes because you got Troy this week, and you should beat Troy. But then again, if you score 10 points again, you might not beat Troy. But in 2 weeks, right after Troy, it's Georgia Tech. And if the offense we saw last night shows up against Georgia Tech, you're going to lose to Georgia Tech. So there's several things they've got to figure out quickly. If Garrett Riley's calling plays, why is the offense so bad when every other spot Garrett Riley's had in his career, his offense has been exceptional? If Dabo's calling plays, why would he when he let the last 2 coordinators call plays and he won national titles? Why would you all of a sudden say, no, let's stop doing that? So none of it makes any sense at all. Any thoughts on any of this, please feel free to let me know. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. Mary broke up with her mathematician boyfriend. She said it was a number of things. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.